if the history of Iran would have turned out different in Persia, we'd be having a very different world right now. It's kind of like the man in the high tower kind of a thing. Like, we're living almost in like, it's almost like we went down the negative timeline, and that's what we're living in, as opposed to if the Atlanteans would have, like Edgar Cayce even says that like the tomb underneath, or the Atlantean archive underneath the paw, in between the paw and the Nile of the Sphinx is full of the Atlantean records, and that they're kept there. They're being hidden and kept from somebody for some reason, whether it's consciously locked, time locked, or they just don't want it to get in the hands of people because of their oppressive history. What is going on there?
Look, I'm glad you brought this up about Iran before I did. I mean, I wouldn't have brought it up because people are going to say, well, look at this Iranian chauvinist go again, But it's true. I've researched this, and I'm convinced that, see, the oldest Iranians are not the Persians. The Persians were latecomers in the formative phase of what we identify as Iranian civilization. The oldest, most powerful Iranians were the Scythians, and also an offshoot of them who became the Sarmatians, that the Greeks called the Amazons, because it was a matriarchal society. The Scythians are latter-day Atlanteans. They are survivors of the destruction of Atlantis, which is to say they're hybrids, which is what the Atlanteans were, demigods. And in ancient Iranian mythology, we have accounts of Scythians living for 700 years. People who live for 700, and they're these huge hulking people, like, Conan the Barbarian,
Yeah.
and redheads, a lot of them, basically Nordic phenotype.
Like Vikings.
Vikings, yes. Okay, so interestingly, there's a term in ancient Iranian, in essentially in the Scythian language, which was misnamed Avestan for a long time. People, in linguistics, they categorize this language that the Avesta, the ancient Iranian scriptures, are written in as Avestan. But recent scholarship has basically uncovered that, no, this is a Scythian language. It's Scythian. And Zarathustra spoke Scythian. Zarathustra was a Scythian. The Gathas are composed in Scythian. And the Scythian scriptures tell us that some of these Scythians, like Rostam, live for like 700 years. And they also tell us that the Iranian people, which is to say the Aryans, the word Iran is a Middle Persian, Pahlavi contraction of the word Aryana. Aryana was the name of Iran in ancient times. And so the Scythians just called themselves Aryans. And the term Saka, from which we get Scythian, is a subgroup of these Aryans. By the way, it means dog people or hound people, and the wolf was their totem. So these, and the Sarmatians who broke off from them, their totem, their war banner is the dragon, which is interesting because the dragon shows up as the rebel symbol in all these cultures where you have the divide between the gods and the titans, or the Elohim and the fallen angels. The dragon is always associated with the rebel side. Like, for example, in the Mayan culture, Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is the dragon who's fighting against Tezcatlipoca, the god who eventually triumphs and creates this horrible human sacrifice cult on the tops of pyramids, right? So anyway, the Scythians say that we lived in an island continent at the center of the world, and our homeland, Arianum Vaeja, the seed cradle of the Aryans, was suddenly overcome by ice. It was suddenly basically encased in ice. And this happened after a cataclysm that deranged the heavens. And it's described as an attack of Ahriman on the world. So look at this. Every culture around the world has a deluge myth, whether it's the Sumerian, the Mesopotamians, the Mayans, the Greeks, what Plato preserves in the Legend of Atlantis. One culture, the Iranian culture, describes that cataclysm in terms of a freezing over rather than a flood. Well, where is there a huge island continent that's now encased in ice?
Hmm.
Antarctica. Antarctica, which, if Charles Hapgood was correct, prior to the Earth crustal slippage about 12,000 some odd years ago, Antarctica was where Argentina is today, with only a small part of it already in the southern polar region, and most of it having the climate of Argentina today. So, yeah, I mean, the ancient Iranian myths suggest that the Aryans, which is to say the Atlanteans, came from Antarctica. And that fits Plato's myth perfectly as well, where, people have, for whatever reason, assumed that Atlantis is in the Atlantic Ocean. That's not what Plato says. He says from Greece you have to leave the Straits of Gibraltar, through the Straits of Gibraltar, and go out into the ocean. And then in the center of the world ocean, there is this island that's the size of, he says, Libya and Asia combined, which is roughly, he meant the size of the Persian Empire. Well, that's like the size of the continental United States. Where do we have an island that's the size of the continental United States, which is in the center of the world ocean, meaning where the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the Indian Ocean all meet in a single ocean? It's the coastline of Antarctica.
Yeah. And it shouldn't even be that surprising. I mean, it's the one place that the entire world has come together in agreement that no one's allowed to go. I mean, there's so many oddities to it, and there's so much evidence that obviously there's something there that they're protecting. I mean, it couldn't be any more on the nose. You know what I mean? Like we can't
By
even
the way,
go there.
Yeah, for sure, and they know, and that's why there's the Antarctic Treaty and all that.
Because they don't want us to hurt the ice. I mean, come on.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, when Antarctica melts to result in this 300-foot sea level rise, we're going to get Atlantis back.
Yeah.
It will thaw. It will thaw. And there are vast cities under that ice, huge megalithic, constructions, extremely high precision, like what we see at Baalbek, with the Baalbek platform in Lebanon, or the Osirian at Abydos, or Tiwanaku in Bolivia, are like small fingerprints, of like this, the lost body that was the Atlantean civilization, which is going to thaw from out of the ice of Antarctica.
Yeah. This reminds me, not too long ago, I think in 2024, Iran, just to bring this all full circle, Iran came out and declared that Antarctica was its property, and they made headlines. I don't know if you remember this. It was a big deal at the time.
Yes.
And so, okay.
And by the way, you know what else Iran said? Iran said that the U.S. government was secretly controlled by Nordic overlords.
They did. They did. I mean, even Haim Eshed from Israel has said very similar type things, about, Trump being in constant contact with these aliens and those kinds of things. But yeah, Iran. So here we go, talking about how, the ancient Persian Empire was probably first started by the remnants and survivors of Atlantis that were surviving this ice age.
Yes, and by the way, Persian Empire is a total misnomer. I mean, this is a term that the Greeks came up with, where because the capital, ceremonial capital, by the way, the administrative capital was in Babylon. They took over Babylon. The Iranians took over Babylon, and they kept it because it was such a cosmopolitan center already of trade and, crossroads and so forth. They made that the administrative capital. But because the ceremonial capital was in Parsa, where the ruins of Persepolis are today, the Greeks referred to all of Iran as Persis, the way, like, when in news reports today, we want to refer to Russia and they say, like, Moscow announced today that such and such, right? And so the whole thing wound up being called Persia by the Greeks, and it stuck in the West. But Iranians have never called their country Persia. They've always called it Iran, or in the ancient form, Aryana. And so the ancient empire, the Hachameneshid Empire, its name was Aryana Khashatra, Aryan Imperium. That was its name. The name of the empire that fought the Greeks was Aryan Imperium, and the same name stuck through the entire Parthian period while Iran was fighting the Romans. And then it's in the Sassanid period, during like the late Roman Empire into the era of Byzantium, when we go from the ancient Iranian language to Middle Persian, Pahlavi, and Aryana Khashatra gets shortened into Iran Shahr, which was the name of the Sassanid Empire, Iran Shahr. And that's where we get Iran from in contemporary. So people like Christopher Beckwith have done studies showing that actually the Achaemenid Empire is much more a Scythian administrative structure than it is Persian. And the foundations of it were laid when the Scythians came in and conquered the Medes, the Median kingdom. The Scythians around about 700 BC came in, they conquered the Median kingdom, and the reshaping of media by the Scythians really laid the groundwork for what ultimately became the Achaemenid Empire.
Huh. So someone like me, I don't want to ever be disrespectful to their culture. What should I call when I speak about ancient Iran? Can I say ancient Iran? Or
just say ancient Iran. Yeah, ancient Iran.
Okay, cool.
That's the correct Iranian studies Iranology term, is to call it ancient Iran.
Perfect. Because there's so much connection there. Obviously, we're tracing back the Atlantis.
You don't want to call it Ariana. You don't want to call it Ariana and get the shit beat out of you in the political correct, cancel culture, thought policing atmosphere that we live in, even though that is in fact what the country was called. But yeah, ancient Iran is good.
Yeah. And I'm not too worried about any of that. But I appreciate you. It's history. And the Aryan people, like, this is something I've traced back because I'm very interested in it. I didn't realize I'm blonde hair, blue eyed. I didn't realize how incredibly rare that is. Like, I always just thought, I grew up in America, like, oh, so many people have blonde hair and blue eyes. It's something like 2% or something of the global population, right? It's a very weird thing, and it's evidently a very new mutation for humans. And my wife is a ginger. She has red hair and green eyes, and her whole family heritage goes back to the Scandinavian countries. Her last name is Schwinghammer, and mine's Crowder. I'm German descent. But anyways, so I've been interested in that. But also my strong tie to Atlantis, and just knowing that, the Atlanteans seem to have gone through, ancient Iran, and knowing now, I pulled up this article, and this is from the Jerusalem Times, and this is last year, February 15th, 2024. Iran's Navy commander announced in a televised broadcast that the regime owns Antarctica and will build a military operation in the South Pole. So they obviously, there's this jockeying for position of Antarctica. You see it already with the countries planting their flags, having their little bases. It's almost like they're just like, there's nothing to do there. It's a complete wasteland. But they're like, we want to have our little flag here just in case, the poles flip and this place thaws out. And then you see Iran being like, okay, well, that's ours. You know what I mean? And now all of a sudden we're attacking Iran. And it's like, is this coincidence? I think not.
Look, I absolutely detest this regime, and I spent many years in the Iranian opposition, and ultimately, I wound up being defamed and had my academic career destroyed because of risks that I took to further the cause of the Iranian opposition. So while I loathe the Islamic Republic and cannot wait to see the day that this regime finally collapses and is replaced by some legitimately Iranian form of government, it is the case that I think this, the Iranian government is in possession of some very sensitive information. They do have secrets that are threatening to the existing power structure in the world. And so, yeah,